Everyone, glad that you're here, and we're going to have an opportunity to just have a little fireside chat. This was John's idea. He privately confessed it was partly so that he would have opportunity to say anything he wanted to about anything that he might want to speak about. So we will ask questions, but he will be free to, of course, do a John Goldingay with us in whatever way he might want that to turn. Now, we did think that it might be helpful, however, to set the stage, and Marianne is going to do that.
Is this on? Okay. Back in the day, we used to have something called the Fuller Follies. You know what's coming. Yes. How many of you were ever at a Fuller Folly? All right. How many of you ever been in the Fuller Follies? Yes. Who can forget the quartet dressed in football uniforms singing "Drop Kick Me Jesus" through the goalposts of life? Yes, or the faculty kazoo band, or John Goldingay doing his rap. So what we would like to present to you, having dug it out of the library archives, yes? What year did we decide it was? 2002? 2003? 2. After a recent earthquake, when John did for us at the Fuller Follies a John Goldingay rap. So we'll have Andrew cue it up and take it away.
Oh, yes, that's so. Oh, okay, right. Where was I? Yes. There were guys who wanted to evacuate the building, and I said no. And there were guys who just come from the East Coast, and their mothers had told them, don't go to California, they have earthquakes there. And it was their first week of classes, and there's an earthquake, and the professor insists on just carrying on lecturing as if nothing had happened. But what was most significant was that I'd been telling them, I was lecturing about Jericho. And I'd been telling them that the archaeological evidence was that there was nobody actually living in Jericho at the time when Joshua is said to have conquered the city and killed everybody there. Now, it's really good that Professor Meye is here tonight because there was a kind of anticipation of this event 2 or 3 years ago when the first time I gave this lecture, and there was a visitor there who then put this information that I'd said there on the internet. Professor Meye kindly told me. But what it set me thinking about this time was, so the earthquake came when I was giving that lecture. So that led me thinking about where were you when the earthquake came? What other issues, lectures might you have been in? What other things might have been being said to provoke an earthquake? Hence this rap, in which I say, where were you when the earthquake came? And you say back to me, where were you when the earthquake came? At the beginning of each verse. And at the end of each verse, I say, that's what was happening when the earthquake came. And you say back, that's what was happening when the earthquake came. Okay? Let's practice. Where were you when the earthquake came?
Where were you when the earthquake came?
You're good. And at the end of the verses, that's what was happening when the earthquake came.
That's what was happening when the earthquake came.
Where were you when the earthquake came?
Where were you when the earthquake came?
I was with Allan reading a psalm, thinking about David sitting under a palm. Then Allan told us David didn't write many. In fact, to be true, he didn't write any. That was the moment when the earthquake came.
That's what was happening when the earthquake came.
Where were you when the earthquake came?
Where were you when the earthquake came?
I was in Pasadena with Marianne and Meye, talking about times when Jesus said, I'm the good shepherd, I am the way. But maybe those are things that Jesus didn't say. That was the moment when the earthquake came.
That was the moment when the earthquake came.
Where were you when the earthquake came?
Where were you when the earthquake came?
I was in Pentateuch with Joel Hunt. He answered a question in a way that was blunt. The laws in the Pentateuch, from greatest to least, they came from other cultures in the ancient Near East. That's what was happening when the earthquake came.
That's what was happening when the earthquake came.
Where were you when the earthquake came?
Where were you when the earthquake came?
I was in Travis with Murphy and Brown. What those two told us caused us to frown. They said mind and body were two sides of a whole. That means there's no such thing as a soul. Well, that's what was happening when the earthquake came.
That's what was happening when the earthquake came.
Where were you when the earthquake came?
Where were you when the earthquake came?
Shola was reading the New Testament text. We were amazed at what he said next. That sister was included when Paul said brother, and it was fine to call on God as mother. That was happening when the earthquake came. Where were you when the earthquake came?
Where were you when the earthquake came?
I was with Butler, Peyton 303, thinking about the garden and the serpent and the tree. He told us that he didn't believe in a literal Adam and a literal Eve. That's what was happening when the earthquake came.
That's what was happening when the earthquake came.
Where were you when the earthquake came?
Where were you when the earthquake came?
Anderson was teaching us all about God. Some of what he told us was very odd. He didn't believe in God's omnipotence or in God's omniscience. They're out of the door. That was what was happening when the earthquake came.
That's what was happening when the earthquake came.
Where were you when the earthquake came?
Where were you when the earthquake came?
Well, now that I've heard all the earthquake views, I see that all the earthquake news, I see that I'd better change my views. From now on, my teaching will be the same as everything you thought before you came. That was what was happening when the earthquake came.
That's vintage. So, John, tell us, not everybody knows anything, perhaps, or very little about the story. How you first landed.
None of them know very much about
Anything. Yes. That was what was happening when the earthquake came. How did you arrive at Fuller? Take us back to the beginning. What brought you here?
Well, the dean kept sending me emails, and the only way to get him off my back was to agree to come. Really, I like to tell the story. There were 2 times I met David Allan Hubbard. The first was when he gave a lecture in Cambridge when I was a graduate student. And then when he first asked me to think about coming to Fuller in about 1980 or 1981, and he invited me to lunch at the Waldorf Hotel in London. And I thought, well, I can't see me going to Fuller, but I mean, if somebody invites you to lunch at the Waldorf Hotel in London, you say yes, don't you? So I went, and we had a very nice lunch. And after lunch, I had pasta, I remember that. And I went towards the elevator to come to get the train back to Nottingham. The elevator doors opened, and there is Leslie Allan. And we both immediately know that we're both there for the same reason, to have the same conversation. And we look at each other in the way that two English gentlemen would and say, oh, funny to meet you here. And Leslie comes out of the elevator and I go into the elevator. And the happy result of that was that Leslie was looking for a move. And so it was as a result of that Leslie came. So that worked out really well. And it was a nice kind of end of that arc in a way. When I finally came in '97, Leslie was the person who kind of hosted me. And so that was really neat. In between, there were several occasions when I met up with Fuller people and we talked about the possibility. But then eventually the kind of planets came into alignment with each other at a point in 1997 when I was looking for a move and Fuller was trying to fill the David Allen Hubbard chair. So that's roughly how it came about.
That's great.
So, John, you and I once had a conversation about vocation, whether you see yourself as a theologian or a historian or any one of a number of other things, working and teaching in the Old Testament. Talk to us a little bit about your vocation in Old Testament here at Fuller. How do you understand what you have been doing for these 21 years?
Okay, but that reminds me of another incident that was part of what brought me here, which was that in fall '96, I was asked to go to the Ex-Auditu conference thing at Chicago to do a paper, and Rob Johnston was there, and actually I'm getting two stories mixed up, but I'll have to tell both of them now. Because
This is what we knew.
okay, right, yeah. So I said something to Rob about Bill Durness had been asking me about who might come and fill the Hubbard chair, and I wasn't sure I got any ideas. And Rob Johnston looked me in the eye and he said, "It's you that he wants." And I kind of knew that, but it was a very important moment. But the thing I'd got mixed up with was another occasion. Maybe it was the same conference. I don't know. Is Rob here?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. When Rob looked me in the eye and said, "You're just a theologian who masquerades as an exegete," and I shouldn't have included the word "just," probably.
Yes.
And I think that's at least half true. That I am interested in the theological significance of the Old Testament. I want people to see how important it is for an understanding of God and of what God is doing with us and of God and the church and God and the world. And if I have at all opened the eyes of anybody in these 21 years to that, which is not when students come, that's not what they think when they come. And if there are a few people who have come to see, oh, wow, yeah, then I've done my job. I've fulfilled my vocation.
Was there, in the course of your teaching here, a high and a low that you could share? Like a moment in teaching when you thought, this is really, it's landing. And another time when it was like, I think I'm on another planet.
I don't know that I've got specific moments like that. But the moments that I love are the moments when, as I say, people come to Fuller very often not having read the Old Testament, but knowing what it says because their Sunday school teacher told them. And I send them away to read, say, Genesis, and they come back and their eyes have popped. And it doesn't say the things that their Sunday school teacher told them it said. And it's when they come back with their eyes popped, that's my good moment. Yeah.
Can you tell us, talk about some of the other hopes for your students here, besides having their eyes popped when they read the New Testament, the Old Testament, New Testament too? Well, maybe both.
Yeah.
what else do you hope for them, or do you hope that it's happened for them in the classroom, or?
Honestly, that's really the only. That's really the
okay.
thing. That's really the thing. But maybe a variant on the same issue is something like this: that I usually spend most of my time thinking that nothing that I do is of the slightest worth or effectiveness as a teacher or as a writer, and about once a month, God inspires somebody to send me an email that says, "Oh, we were just doing this thing on Psalms in our church study group, and how valuable I found it to remember things that we didn't," something like that. And so when I learn that something has made a difference to somebody's life or to their ministry, then that's what I want.
So all during this time, you've been really amazingly prolific in your writing. Was that just a natural, easy thing for you to do? Or did that come with such prolificness over time?
Is that different? I don't say
did it
It's easy in the sense that I love writing and I love thinking about the things, and it's part of that passion that I was just talking about. It's one way or another. Most of it is an expression of that passion that I was just talking about, and in that sense, it's kind of easy. It was kind of easy here because before I came, when I was at St John's Theological College in Nottingham, I was doing a job more like yours. And you know how impossible that is, or for that matter, yours at the moment, you know. And one of my vivid memories of when I arrived was coming into school in the mornings and going to my office and looking around for the piles of paper that I needed to deal with, and realising that there weren't any, and thinking to myself, "Oh, I'll go to the library then." That the freedom that I got in moving away from being, to a fair extent, an administrator, to back into being just an ordinary Old Testament professor, was the thing that opened up the space. But I guess also I came at a point in life when, I was 55 when I came. I'd been teaching for 25 years or something, and writing things, and so I was at a kind of stage when I could write these big books, for instance, because I'd been thinking about those issues for a while. So I guess maybe it was there was an instinct, there was opportunity, there was it being the right moment.
When you talk about your instincts, John, in writing, how does the muse come to you? How do you get your ideas? I want to write this. It's a problem that needs to be dealt with. There are different things that motivate people to write, or they land on their topics in different ways. Yeah. How did you come? Do you have any? Yeah. Are you able to reconstruct how you came to the ideas for the books that you came to, or did they just?
Yeah, maybe occasionally. I think the difference for me. Kathleen writes novels, and to me, the notion of writing a novel or writing poems, as she also does, is a complete mystery. How can you start with nothing and then produce something? That to me is a mystery. But what I do, I start with the Bible, and the Bible is so full of stuff, and it's so stimulating that it stimulates me, and so that's very important to the process. And so, in writing a thing like that, I simply, and the way the way I have nearly finished the draft of a commentary on Genesis. And the way that I write commentaries nowadays is, first of all, I do translation, and I write what I can write about that, attempting to let the text be the thing that causes things to arise, rather than at the beginning reading 10 other people's commentaries and getting sucked into what they already thought were the questions and what was the interscholarly debate. And so letting the scriptures be the stimulus that makes you say things. And then, which is also how I tell students to write papers, then by all means go and read the other books, because they will sometimes show you that you were stupid and sometimes make you think things that you wouldn't otherwise have thought. But that you're in kind of in interaction with the scriptures themselves. That's mostly the way things work for me. Sometimes when I wrote, sometimes it's a question that I need to get my mind around, of which the books that I wrote, Models for Scripture and Models for Interpretation of Scripture, which were originally supposed to be one book, but when I sent it to Erdmans, they said it's too big. So I divided it into two, and they published them separately, which I think was, maybe it was okay. It was funny anyway at the time that I managed to get them to publish them anyway. But there, I knew that there was something wrong with the way that evangelicals thought about the doctrine of Scripture. Not that it was wrong. I don't mean it was wrong in the sense that the Scriptures don't have authority and inspiration, all those things, but that the way in which we attempted to articulate what was the nature of Scripture was somehow wrong, and I wanted for myself to be able to think it through. And I was aware that it was at a point in which the issues about hermeneutics were being discussed a lot, and there were lots of interesting different insights that were coming out about interpretation. And I had a kind of hunch that if you thought about the diversity of the form of Scripture and about these different approaches to interpretation and about the question of Scripture's own nature, theological nature, that there was something that could be that I could articulate, at least I wanted to see if I could articulate an answer to my question, which I suppose is actually, now I come to think about it, how I started. The very first, this is the end of 49 years on my part as a graduate student of Old Testament. How about that? So that's why I'm entitled to a jubilee next year. And in that first year, 969 to 70, does that mean, does the math work? Anyway, that first year, a question that I focused on was, how can you think about the narrative of Scripture having authority when it has varied relationships to what actually happened, like the question about Jericho, which has become a familiar question, but nobody had got quite an answer to that when I was trying, and I needed to think it through for myself. So sometimes quite often it's because I need to think through a question for myself.
Well, let me tell you, I had a student in my office a couple of weeks ago who wanted to talk about the authority of Scripture, and I said, you ought to read this book, Models of Scripture. I just found those categories quite helpful, and I passed it on to him.
I'm glad. Thank you.
John, we know that we're not losing you as a teacher. You're going to continue to teach. You've
Yep.
even said you're going to attend faculty meetings remotely, which is just astounding.
It's part of the contract.
I see.
I have to come to faculty meetings and to join faculty meetings at 11 o'clock at night. And so at the moment, Kathleen and I, we wake up at 6:30 and we try to get the light off by about kind of 11:30. And if I just move an hour, and anyway, England tends to live an hour later than California does. So if we start putting the light off at getting up at 7:30 and putting the light off at 12:30, then stretching it to having to stay awake till 1 o'clock for a faculty meeting might not be too bad.
Yeah. So we're
But
glad.
watch whether my eyes are going like this, you know.
We're glad that we're not going to lose you. But, Marianne was just asking about some of the questions about Muse, and you were just discussing some of the questions that you're still working on. I'm sure you're going to continue to write, as you have desire and opportunity to do. What are some of the questions that you're going to take into this next season of your life?
I don't know that I've exactly got questions. Because I'm more aware of having, I've nearly done this commentary on Genesis, and then I've got to write a new Nikot commentary on Jeremiah. So those are I'm aware of as the projects for the next 2 or 3 years. I do want, I've forgotten, I think this might have been my agent, Peter Quant. Isn't that a great phrase to be able to use? My agent, Peter Quant. I think maybe he was suggested writing a narrative commentary on the likes of Amos and Hosea and Micah. In other words, trying to recreate the story of the people on whose behalf, you can almost say, people like Amos and Hosea are prophesying. Because if you can understand what was going on for them, what their stories were, then you wouldn't need a commentary on Amos, because that's what they're responding to. And that's something I'd be interested in trying to pick up. Kathleen wants me to write an Old Testament commentary on the book of Revelation. And that might be interesting too. Yeah.
I want to acknowledge Kathleen, who's over here.
Hi.
Let's just welcome her.
So, John, what are some of your most treasured memories of Fuller, Pasadena, California, whatever?
Well, until recently, the being in the classroom doing that thing. I say until recently because I have actually I kind of got burnt out really.
Mm-hmm.
But until I felt in the last 18 months when I've stopped looking forward to the classroom, I used to look forward to the classroom with great enthusiasm because of that. It's that process, and that's the heart of the whole thing for me. Is that thing in the classroom. I enjoy my relationships with my colleagues. I've had a great collection of colleagues, and so I appreciate that very much. I have a lot of very good memories of. We've always had students back to our house for scones and tea after class, and we've had some great times just kind of sitting there. I've had a number of particularly when Anne was alive. My first wife Anne died 8 years ago, and she was wheelchair bound, and particularly then, friendships with some students and kind of dinner parties with students were a very important part of my life as a kind of support structure thing then. Apart from that, it's going to the beach for lunch, and it's going to Claremont to listen to the Baldy Mountain Jazz Band who play there once every 2 weeks. Yeah.
Tell us, you're going to take with you your sartorial splendor, and tell us about the birthplace of the. Oh, I see.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
I see. Yes.
Well, we've all got on red socks today, huh?
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
Wait. I pointed out that on the day when we had all dressed like John Goldingay, John had worn a shirt and tie. I actually thought he'd probably wear a suit or something. I knew he was going to do this.
And I know people were so upset when they came and saw me. So I mean, I'd obviously got to take my clothes off because otherwise, I'd obviously got to take my clothes off because otherwise people were. I mean, I'd so hurt people. I do want to tell you. Well, this is part of the answer to the question, really. When I
see now, doesn't he look a lot more just like John, just more relaxed?
When I first came, after not very long, I spotted that not many faculty went around in T-shirts and shorts. And I said to my then faculty assistant, did faculty have a lecture in shorts? And he thought for a moment and he said, yeah, there was a professor who lectured in shorts, but he didn't get tenure. So through nearly to the end, I think probably right to the end of that first year, I used to wear long pants often because I cycle in from where we live, and so I used to cycle in shorts and then put long pants on after, on top of my shorts, and that began to feel a bit stupid eventually. So I gave up and thought, they won't deny me tenure just because of that. But there wasn't, and they didn't. There was an occasion when we did do one of these scones nights. So I needed, when we did those, to get out of the end of the. It was during the summer, and the classes were finishing at 9:20 or something, and I needed to get out quickly in order to get home, in order to become the host of this event. So at the end of the lecture, I took off my long pants because I did exactly what I've just done, and that caused a certain amount of consternation in the class, as you can imagine. Yeah. Was that the question? Is that an answer to the question? Or the answer?
I'm sure it was. Yeah, I'm sure that's it.
Yeah, right, yeah.
You were asking him about taking his sartorial splendor to England. Did you want to follow
Yeah,
on?
well, the other thing that I think of is that you're such a live music lover. You already mentioned
Yeah.
one of your routines, but it goes beyond that. I mean, you've been a live music aficionado.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. Why has that been so important?
Because music is fantastic. Because live music is terrific. I mean, what can you say? Excuse me.
What kind of music?
Most kinds, really. Oddly enough, not so much the kind of, well, not heavy metal, and I'm not so enthusiastic about Beethoven.
Oh, dear.
Or Shostakovich, but I mean, I do like Vivaldi, and we've been to a couple of times in the last year to the Disney Hall for that sort of music. I love, actually, one of the things I'm really looking forward to about Oxford is being able to listen to the amount of traditional English type church music, which, I mean, I became a music aficionado as a result, really, of being a cathedral choir boy in Birmingham. Now, there's an image for you in Birmingham, in the city that I come from, and that was what got me engaged with music, and it was particularly church music, English church music that I got engaged with. But then, of course, I was of a student age when the Beatles happened, and I saw the Beatles, but also got interested in jazz, especially Dixieland jazz, which I didn't realise until I came here that jazz was an American thing. Yeah, you laugh a lot because people say, "Oh, it's America's great contribution to," I didn't know because I listened to English jazz bands pretending, as it were, to be Dixieland jazz bands. And if there were exceptions to that, there was Sidney Bechet, who I assumed was French but actually was American, and a crowd called the Dutch Swing College Band. Now, there's a kind of impossibility. Dutch swing, apologies to any Dutch persons present. So I got engaged with jazz. And obviously, when you came here, there is, the town that I lived in England, Nottingham, was a provincial town. So there were concerts, but not on a vast scale. And when you come here and you find out how much there is of rock music. I didn't used to like country music, but I've grown to like Americana type country music, not country music played by people wearing big hats. And various kinds of jazz here. I guess because music reaches me anyway, yeah. I did used to sing rock and roll in England, but I never got the chance to here, apart from one or two occasions in the Fuller Follies.
Well,
It's not too late.
I think it's probably too late now, yeah.
John, we know that you're going to, you and Kathleen are moving to Oxford. You have a place that you've already purchased there. You're going to be moving in. Your boxes, as of today, are going to be taken care of. Your furniture will be disappearing. You leave next
The
Tuesday.
furniture's more or less disappeared, actually.
I see.
All we've got is a bed and a desk, 2 desks, and 2 chairs, one of which is the David Allan Hubbard chair. Do you know that there is a David Allan Hubbard chair?
I didn't know that.
Well, when I came here I discovered that chairs don't have chairs.
yes.
Oh, that's stupid. So this is probably, I'll probably get in trouble for this. No, I won't now, will I? That I used some of my chair fund to buy a David Allan Hubbard chair. So I look forward. I hope that when you have the opportunity to install my successor, I did think about taking this chair with me, but I decided that wasn't fair, really. So there is a chair in which to install the chair.
Good.
How did we get into that? Oh, yes, we've got 2 chairs. So I promised to bring that into school before I finish. And there was a question that I interrupted. What was it?
Just wanting to picture the scene that you were in.
The scene at the moment is we're living in an empty house.
Yep. And on Tuesday you fly away.
On Sunday the bed disappears, and we go to the guest house. On Tuesday we fly to England. On Wednesday we stay at my son's in St Albans, which is just an hour or so away from Oxford. On Thursday we drive to Oxford and get the keys to the apartment, which my son and his wife urged us to buy, and we haven't seen.
So imagine you're rocking in the David Allan Hubbard chair or sitting.
You can rock it, yes,
exactly. Yeah. And you were wanting to give us, David Allan Hubbard, parting advice. What would you, John Galloway, want to give us as parting advice as individuals or as an institution?
Wow, parting advice. Stay believing in God. Because I'm worried that American evangelicalism, as I experience it, doesn't believe in God very much. It believes in us. It's our job to go and bring about justice in the world and that kind of thing. And if anybody's going to bring about justice in the world, it's God. And I think one of my reflections on the time here is something like this: that I came in 1997 was the end of the time, was close to being really the end of the time of the charismatic movement in Britain, and towards the end, getting towards the end of the time of the equivalent here. And there had been, and the great tension, one of the great tensions in Fuller when I came was a tension between SOT and SWIM, the School of World Mission, as it was in those days, about whether theology was the thing that really counted, or whether casting demons out of people and watching miracles happen was the thing that really counted. And it seemed weird to me. You had to choose between those because, it just seemed weird to me that you had to choose between those. But I think that the Signs and Wonders movement, like the charismatic movement and the Signs and Wonders thing in England, kind of dissipated about the end of the millennium or the beginning of this one. And I think we've fallen into assuming again that it depends on us. And maybe the thing that I fear most for American Christianity, American evangelicalism, is that it thinks that it all depends on us. And if that's so, then we are screwed. And what it depends on is God. And our job is to call on God and seek for God to do what only God can do in the grimness of the context, in many ways, in which we live in the world and in the nation today.
I think Marianne and I want to maybe just say thank you. So do you want to say something on behalf of SOT, and I'll say something on behalf of Fuller?
Well, over the years, we've tried to teach John American English, what it means to table something in a faculty meeting, and a number of other things. I don't know how successful that's been. But what can we say, John, except it's been a wonderful opportunity to have you as a colleague, whether it's been on committees, as a faculty, as a teacher in the classroom. You can see the students who have come to show their appreciation. I've appreciated the joy. I can remember you and Anne, and always, as I said to you once, there was always that care for her, that joy in very difficult times. We've appreciated the kind of witness you just gave to us now, that our lives depend on God and that it is God to whom we look rather than to ourselves. All the books you've written, but just the person you've been among us. And I, on behalf of my colleagues in SOT and students here in SOT and everyone else, just want to say to you, thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and God go with you.
Thank you.
John, I think one of the most important things to me about the gospel is that it's disruptive and that Jesus was an eccentric. And
we know where this is going.
That naturally brings me to think about you and the true way that a faithful eccentric keeps people on edge. And I've seen that in faculty meetings, I've seen it in classrooms, I've seen it in lectures that you've given, I've seen it in personal conversations. And it's always had a quality of light and hope and truthfulness and honesty and a refusal to wrongly center anything else but God in the way that you just testified to. And I think, to me, one of the great gifts that you've given as an energy force field to the whole institution has been your eccentricity, which I think has borne witness to the eccentricity of the gospel in your scholarship and in your personality, in your humor, in your tenderness, in your love for people, in your passion for the gospel and all of its meaning in both Old and New Testaments. And I just want to say that personally, your being here has just been such a huge part of my time in these last years, and how grateful I am for your friendship and your support. But I know that for all of us, you leaving is a big deal, and you've taken it in stride, and you seem to be handling it all well. I'm not sure we're all going to handle it as well as I think you are. But on behalf of all of us, including what Marianne just shared, I just want to say for all of us, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
God bless you. Now, I think there's ice cream. Is that
That's right.
that
That's
way?
ice cream out that way. John's request. So.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So, yeah, well,